when you try to better yourself, when you start taking a real hard look at yourself of how you can improve, it's not a one and done. And what I try to tell people, and I know we're going to get into this about, some of the treatments that, my wife and I have been focused on the last 6 years. We tell everybody this is not a magic bullet. It's not a panacea. It's kind of the start. It gets you back to your baseline, but it's still up to you to continue on, improving. People don't understand that initially. Everybody, Americans want just to take a pill and get better, or they want to, inject themselves with something and get better and happen overnight. But it's really easy. I say, if you want to get in shape, do you go to the gym for a day? Or do you go for a month and you get yourself in shape, and then do you stop for the rest of your life? The answer is no. Mental health, wellness, it's the same thing, right? You have to be consistent. And then especially if you have some things going on in your brain, in your body, you really have to be consistent, because when you stop, that's when you start to spiral again. That's when you can kind of crawl back into that dark place, as I call it. So I appreciate the comment about the aura. The best, one of the best, geez, I'm losing my thought here. I guess comments I received from an individual I was talking to at a restaurant a few years ago, speaking to him for 45 minutes, and he goes, "Oh man, you were in the military?" He goes, "I didn't even know that."
Exactly.
And I went, "Wow."
Yeah.
I just said, that's wonderful. I said, that's the best thing I've ever heard, because it means I didn't use acronyms and I didn't come across to this guy I had for the last.
That's funny, because somebody, every time somebody's like, "Oh, I knew you were in the military," you have that sense about you. I'm like, oh man, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's not really a compliment, but I appreciate you trying to be nice.
Right. And it's not, it's not a bad thing, but it's, when you transition, you want to transition.
Yes.
You want to try to, you're trying to reinvent yourself. And, the more
I think that's a misconception people have, is when veterans get out and they think they're somehow above and superior to civilians. And a lot of it, the vets that I talk to, it's the constant struggle to reconnect and get back to where they were before the military. And I feel like it's a misconception that some civilians have about veterans. You know what I mean? They're desperate to reconnect and feel connected again.
Yeah, you were somebody else prior to joining the military, right?
Yes.
You were this different individual. You had a life. You had, for many, many of my friends that I initially that I went to buds with were out of college. Some of them were closer to 30 years old. So they've had lives prior to joining the military. And then, of course, they spent 10, 15, 20, or 30, now 30 years. You become changed, right? You're a changed person. You have to conform. You're part of the tribe, and then you transition out, and many become lost.
Yeah.
And then you find yourself, or you try to get back to maybe the old version of you, or you don't even know what the old version, or you may not even have that version. You may just be this different being.
Yeah.
And for many, it's tough. For others, it's not. For me, I think I failed, right, initially, and I had to kind of climb back and find out who I was again.
The X Factor, man, I think he's going to change the game, dude.
I do too.
I love the thing, man.
Yeah.
I hope people see it for the genius that it is, man.
Oh, I appreciate that.
That is another thing, too. Your dad was a genius when it came to design of equipment.
Yes.
You yourself are a pioneer in that.
Thanks.
Is just like an inherent thing, or how did that?
It was
about?
being around him all the time,
Yeah.
and he would, he and I would sometimes just sit out in the gym for hours.
Yeah.
And just stare at something. We would just we'd be in two chairs, like the two Muppets, and
awesome.
we'd be going, I'd go, what about, and we'd have drills out and everything. And he's like, what if we put a hole there? Could we, I'd tap it and we'd vacuum it out and we'd play with it. Shoot, that didn't work. And then we would just mess with it again,
I bet your dad loved that, man. Just a chance to have a son that's into what you're doing.
He loved it. That was when he was really happy, when he was out in the gym just screwing with stuff.
That's awesome, man.
And then I got that too, and I enjoy it. And I love looking at movement patterns. He liked more the mechanics of things. Okay. I like the movement patterns and building the equipment around the movements of how to the different load parameters and things like that. So it was cool because I was coming into my own, but I was also a competitive athlete during the time as kind of he was cresting his athletic career. And then we kind of worked out really well where our style of training, what we believed in, power production and human performance training, that kind of became in vogue about, like exactly the time that I got on the scene. And it wasn't because of me. I just think I was
What
super
year
blessed.
about was that circa?
So my first day officially at Sorin X, it was July 1, 1999.
Yeah, so that's so weightlifting became popularized in college in the early 90s with Nebraska.
Correct. Yes.
And it was good stuff, but it was still
course.
based on bodybuilding.
Yeah, and powerlifting. Yeah,
yes.
and so there was not that, there was powerlifting and then there was some Olympic lifting and no one
Which
had
at
really...
the time changed the game because people weren't doing anything, right?
Yeah.
But then once everybody's powerlifting and bodybuilding now.
When everyone has a 600-pound squat, you got to do, then it started kind of like, hey, let's do more sport-specific things. I know that name gets a bad rap. But that was kind of when that started really gelling and looking outside the box of like the West Side stuff and some of the Russian stuff and some of the things from track and field. And that was kind of that like human performance boom of the late 90s, early 2000s. And I was a 22-year-old kid who was training to go to the Olympics and I was undersized. And so everything I was doing was I was flipping over every rock trying to find the answers of how do I get on that team.
So take me back to how did you progress through that sport into a point where you were so good? You were a four-time Division I All-American in the hammer throw.
Yeah.
How did you go from that to the Olympics? What was that progression?
So I walked on at South Carolina. I was not a good thrower in high school. I was like an outdoors kid. Like I was a 6'2", 172 pounds.
172 pounds.
172, 6'2". And I was fishing all the time, spear fishing in the lake and bow fishing and hunting and goofing around. And I lifted weights. That was my sport, was lifting weights. I liked lifting weights and I threw some discus and I sucked. And I went to South Carolina only because I applied at Appalachian State because I want to be like one of those outdoor kids.
Yeah.
And I applied late, so I didn't get in right away. They're like, hey, you could come in the spring. I'm like, I'll go to South Carolina, get my grades up, whatever. I got there, drank for the first 6 days, just partied my butt off, like, that type of thing. And I called Pops and I was like, hey, didn't we build the weight room at the South Carolina Athletics? And he's like, yeah. I said, the equipment in the like
rec
P
center or whatever
sucks,
they call it,
and I was like, I know they have, I was like, could you call the coach and see if I could work out in there? And he's like, yeah. So he calls him. It's the 90s. He get away with anything, like 1984.
Especially, come on, your dad.
In his 10 miles away, right? Like he's down there all the time.
Your dad was like one of the pioneers of...
Yeah, sure. So sure, tell him to come in after all the athletes are gone. I'm like, okay. Well, again, I'm 17 years old, so don't exactly follow directions as well. So I eat a couple burritos. I'm hanging in my dorm. I'm like, I'm just going to go, like whatever time that was. It was like 2:30 or 3. If you've been in a college weight room, about 2:30 or 3 is when every athlete is in there because all the classes are over. Yep. So I cruise in like first week of school. I'm like looking around. No one says anything. Like no one asked me who I am.
Yeah.
Like, sweet. Walk over, load the bar, start cleaning. No one says anything. Which is wild that you could totally crash.
Like
you could totally crash an athletics weight room.
You crash a lot if you're walking like you belong there. Yeah. People won't ask, man.
People won't ask you. Like, I got to know how to clean.
You
must be swimming and diving or something. so then I go over.
We have water polo.
Yeah, this is crazy. And so these dudes are in a line doing a vertical jump test on the Bird Tech. I'm like, that looks badass. I've never done that.
Yeah.
So I like stood in line.
No fucking way.
100%.
So I like to find key moments of opportunities missed.
That is the day my life changed.
Yeah, and because you stood in that line.
100%.
It wasn't just the opportunity; it was you taking advantage. It was you getting in line and crossing that line.
That day changed the trajectory of my life, and I'll show you why. So, I showed up at the gym, did something different than all the other kids weren't doing.
It's funny. The other guy I did the podcast with, I wonder if you, such a different story, but similar things. Small advantages.
Yes.
Had to go out and take the initiative and talk to people, put themselves in an uncomfortable foreign environment,
100%,
and take advantage of the opportunities put in front of you.
And the last piece of the puzzle is you have to walk through the open door when it's open. And so I'm standing in. I'll never forget. I'm standing in the line with a whole bunch of just big dudes. No idea who they are. We get there. I measure. I jump. 29 3/4 inches. He's like, hey, that's pretty good. I'm like, hey, thanks. I had the highest of all the people in the line.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool. Walk back over, keep cleaning. Walk over bench press. I'm like, oh shit, they're doing body fat testing. That looks awesome. And then, because I loved Rocky IV, I'm like, diagnostics are cool. But I sucked in high school, so they weren't going to do any of that stuff on me. So I'm just like, this looks badass. It's like, I wasn't really an athlete.
Dude, this is a phenomenal story, man.
This is 100% true. And so I wasn't really an athlete. I was like an outdoor kid that liked weightlifting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's badass. So I stand in line again. And it's like Forrest.
So funny.
It's like,
dude, this could be a movie.
It's like Forrest Gump. He's like, so I stood in line, and then I got I met the president again, which is actually the origin story of how all the ridiculousness of my life basically shook out because of this day.
Yeah,
I stood in line. I was like, this looks interesting. I stood in line.
Yeah.
Summited Hope's Pass, turned around, summited again, made it back into Twin Lakes. I sat down, and my little brother was standing there, and I went, like, I couldn't stand up.
Yeah.
And my brother had to pick me up and, like, lock my knees, and I walked the next 50K. I walked the next 31 miles.
You did finish?
I didn't. I made it to 87.
Okay.
And you have to make it there by 7 a.m. I made it there at like 7:04, 7:05.
So you didn't quit.
And I did not quit. I got cut off as soon as I came out. They're like, hey, cutoff was 7. It's past the cutoff. You're done.
My coach used to always tell us, like, we don't ever lose a game. We just run out of time.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. And that's
the mentality that you have to.
And I think that right there, like teaching myself that in my very first ultra, like taking that mentality and knowing that I didn't quit, like that's what I took moving forward in life, where I'm like, if that didn't break me, what's going to break me moving forward?
How long does that take normally?
So you have 30 hours to complete the race. The reason I was cut off is I wasn't on pace to make that 30-hour cut. I was at like 27 and I still had 14 more miles to go. Last year, I did it in, I think it was 28 hours. But there's a big difference between, people like, this is why I don't consider myself elite, because like the guy that won it went like 15 hours.
That's insane.
And then I go 28, and people look at me and they're like, oh, like there's differences. There's
always like levels to elite.
Yes.
Because just being able to move 100 miles on foot by any standard is elite.
Yeah.
And it is humbling though, to know that like you're doing something that very few people in this world can do, and there's people that do it better.
And then there's someone that does it in 15 hours, sleeps through the night, and then comes back and watches me finish.
That's insane.
like that's the craziest
You meet those
part.
people throughout your life. I consider you one of them that is just like examples of just something that's almost superhuman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so part of today that I want to talk about is like what led you in that journey to becoming something that in certain aspects is superhuman.
Yeah.
That, most people consider impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's start with what was it like being Matt as a kid? Like, what brought you to this point of being able to do this kind of stuff to instill that fortitude inside you?
Yeah, like I think back and, like growing up, like early on, right? Like let's go back. I think it was like 8 years old, right? Like let's go back to that time frame. And I think that, early on it was, it was just my mom and I. Like my mom had me when she was, like she got pregnant when she was 16. Had me when she was 17.
What part of the country is this?
This is back home in the Midwest. This is Iowa, middle of the cornfield, nearest Walmart, 20 minutes away.
Yeah. I'm from the Midwest too, and we always judged how far out we are by how close the nearest Walmart is.
Yes,
it's funny.
yes,
it's a universal measurement of how far in the boonies you are.
I love that. I love it. Yeah. No stoplights, just stop signs. 3 bars in the town, but like 1 gas station.
Sounds about right.
Yeah,
sweet,
yeah.
You don't need to get gas at all.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, growing up early, right? Like before my brother was born, he was born when I was 8, but, so like 5, 6, 7, it was just my mom and I, and, we lived in a double wide trailer, and she worked overnights at the gas station, and she worked, day shift at Principal Financial in Des Moines. So she would drive an hour to Des Moines, to the city, right, to the capital. She would work in the financial building. She would drive home, and then she would go and work overnights at the gas station. And I don't ever remember being young and thinking that I didn't have anything I didn't want.
Sure,
I had great Christmases. Like I had, I always ate.
Did you recognize at the time how special that was to your mother? That
No.
It was. Yeah,
Never.
we don't as kids,
no,
right?
No, we don't. And not even as kids, not even as teenagers. Like it took me till like 25, 26, 27 today to begin to realize like what she did for me.
Yeah.
And to be able to realize like those things whether you realize them in the moment, as a human being, you know what's happening.
Do you think that's part of the reason you are where you are today, is like that example she set for you?
Yeah, for sure. Because I watched her go through all of these hard things and do all of these hard things, not even knowing it in the moment. But that's what gave me the realization that, oh, hard is normal. You know, so for me, it was like, hard is watching my mom work 2 jobs. Hard is me sitting at the kitchen table at 5 years old, eating 99-cent macaroni out of a pan, and my mom's crying because I'm going to eat it all and she's not going to eat that night.
Oh my God.
That's hard. You know, and I think realizing that as an adult, that running 100 miles compared to your mother not eating just so you could, that which one of those is hard?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, you know, unbeknownst to me, like that's what I carry inside me, you know, and then obviously, you know, as we talked about before, and, you know, many people have heard on the podcast, you know, the mental and physical abuse that we, you know, entailed in the next, you know, 10 years through her ex-husband. And, you know, there was just so many things in life that showed me this is real life hard, that I think that, just like I said, you know, like David Goggins, you know, is quoted saying, in the cookie jar, the things that are in the cookie jar. And for me, it's the real life hard that is in my cookie jar that I draw out of when I am out there doing
strength, strength through the trauma that you had to endure.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, that's the great thing about trauma, right? Is that you can decide how it defines you.
Absolutely.
You know, and you can take that trauma and you can say, you know, oh, poor me, I'm going to go and turn to drugs and alcohol and abuse. Or you can say, I'm going to use this to make me stronger and to make sure that I can educate and show people that this doesn't define them.
Absolutely.
And that was a path at some point that I was presented with, and you know, God willing, I took the right one, I hope.
I remember one time in particular, my cousins were outside playing, and like I got hurt or something, because I was always like the little one and I was always the baby, and so I was crying. And I run inside and I'm pouting, and no one's paying any attention to me, because that's kind of the way that they dealt with stuff, is they would just like let you figure it out on your own, you know? And finally my uncle comes over to me, and then he walks me over to the window and he goes, hey, he goes, listen, your cousins are out there playing. Sun's still out. You know, you should probably go out there and just enjoy playing with them. But I'm like, but, you know, and he's like, well, you can make the decision. You can stay in here with all the adults and we're doing boring stuff, and you can sit here and cry. He's like, or you can get back out there and play.
How old are you?
Like 8, 9 years old.
Man, that's a fantastic memory. So that's such an enormous message right there. Beautiful story. Man.
It just gave me insight into like, oh, wait a second, you have a choice. So like, even with
and for you to understand that at the moment, remember that,
and even with my mother's side of the family, regardless of the things that happen, because we can amplify the things that happen to us, or the things that happen to us can actually be horrific or horrible, but we still have a decision on how we're going to react to those things regardless. And there's really nothing that we can do about some of the things that may have happened in the past in the first place. So I understand why it might be more difficult for my mom to overcome what she overcame versus I didn't have that kind of heartache in my life. I didn't have that distrust in my parents. I didn't have all the things that she went through. But I saw my mother actually figure out a way to be happy. And I saw her have the strength and the courage to instill so much confidence in me and my brothers, to the point where, you know, my dad worked for IBM for like 20 years and wore a suit and tie every day. But all 3 of us were never going to do that. Yeah. We were going to be pro wrestlers. My brother was going to be a writer and a director. And
your brothers are pretty renowned as well.
Right. Yeah. That's what and like, is because the confidence that my mother instilled in us, even though it was hard for her to be confident. So yeah, at a very young age, I just recognized like, oh, there's like a decision you can just like sort of make up your mind to be happy.
It's an important lesson there for dads and uncles and stuff. And anybody that's an adult or a role model, little things you say and do can have profound impacts, negative and positive, on your children or young men and women in your life. I don't know if your uncle probably even remembered that.
Not a chance. I don't think he has any idea.
What got me into working out seriously when I was in 8th grade, there was a lift-a-thon, a bench press competition, right? And I thought these high schoolers were impossibly strong. I think they bench press like 200 pounds or something, and I'm sitting there looking at it. And at the end, they invite the kids down, and I'll never forget, I bench pressed 115 pounds in 8th grade. And the head coach slapped me on the back and he goes, "You're pretty strong. Never forget it." And then my mind was like, I'm pretty strong. I can be strong. It completely changed the trajectory of my life. And I promise you, he doesn't remember that.
Changes the way you walk, changes the way you talk, changes the way you think about yourself every day. And who knows, maybe at that point in your life, you hadn't really gotten a compliment for many things, or, maybe for some kids, like you probably have had compliments for stuff you've done physically before, but maybe for some kids, maybe it's the first time they've ever heard a compliment from that particular thing. Maybe it's the first time, "Hey, that was a job well done. Great job on the essay that you did this week." Maybe that kid's never been congratulated for doing something with his mind rather than something physical, or vice versa. So it's massively important. But yeah, that's who I am. That's where I come from. I come from a background of just a lot of love, and I really just was like, I think it's important for me to share this with people. And sometimes people are like, "Oh, you're selling yourself short," but I'm not trying to. My story isn't David Goggins' story. I wasn't abused as a kid. I'm very, grateful that I had amazing parents. But I think it's important for me to tell people this story for multiple reasons. Number one, like, you don't have to have crazy adversity in your life to make this an awesome life and to be somebody that reaches a fairly high standard. I think that everyone always thinks that like all the craziness needs to happen to you. Otherwise, you can't make it. Like, you have to be like a Mike Tyson or something like that, right?
I remember I did a podcast with a guy who came back from cancer, right? And he told me one time somebody told him, "You're so lucky you had cancer," because he uses it as like his motivational story. They're like, "You're so lucky you had cancer." He's like, "Are you serious? Did you seriously just tell me that?" Yeah, it is funny. You know what I mean? The way you live your life can make people think that these incredible challenges are blessings, because they are, right? Mm-hmm. But people look at it like, "Oh, he's so lucky to have it overcome that," because look at what it led. Like, exactly, right. We're all lucky, right?
Right.
That's just a phenomenal story of an adult sitting down with you at a young age, and way to paint a picture of two different households that choose to be happy and choose to not under, I'm sure very similar socioeconomic circumstances as well, right?
100%. And then also, on top of, what I'm mentioning here is like, everyone has their own struggles. Like, it's impossible. You're not going to.
And you can't always see other people's struggles either.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. But go on, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. If you're a parent, you cannot protect your child from all the different things that are going to happen with them or to them. They're going to incur some hurdles. They're going to run into some challenges. And for me, for my brother Chris is short. And then it doesn't stop there. He was born with chronic pain. He's got a lot of pain. He had surgery on both knees when he was a kid. But the blessing of it is this. This is what started my powerlifting career and started his as well. And bigger, stronger, faster, and all these things came from this one thing that happened. My brother Chris, born with tons of pain, had these knee surgeries. He came out of the knee surgery and he went to a chiropractor who was helping him with rehab, and the guy had him do squats with a broomstick on his back. At 19 years old, my brother goes to high school senior nationals in Chicago, and the person that wrapped my brother's knees there, because my brother only went with my dad, was Ed Cohn.
That's insane.
Greatest power lifter of all time.
When he started following me is maybe like one of the best days of my life.
Isn't that
like
amazing?
That dude's just, and he is like the nicest, sweetest, most articulate guy.
He's incredible.
Yeah.
And so my brother, goes to this high school powerlifting competition, ends up doing really well. I think he finished like second or something like that. He squatted 650 pounds, but what a great boost of confidence he got from, the greatest lifter of all time. But that spearheaded our powerlifting career or my powerlifting career anyway. It was my brother having these, deficiencies or deformities, or like, I don't even know, what you would call.
And then your brother being older is in a position too where he can be a role model and a mentor. It's a big
responsibility. We went to the gym all the time, and I hung out with Chris all the time. He's 4 years older than me. He would bring me to like high school parties, and we did all kinds of stuff together. Never saw him drink. He was like, "Well, we're going to lift tomorrow morning." So like,
Man,
I'm not going to. And plus he was driving. So he's like, I'm not drinking. He didn't care about alcohol at that time anyway. So that was another thing where I would observe that. And I'm like, well, I realize there's other people like having fun and like getting more carried away than my brother, but he seems to be having a great time and he's not drinking. So, I was able to avoid a lot of stuff just by examples and seeing the anti-heroes in my family and the heroes in my family. I think the anti-hero was way easier to see. Like, I do not want any part of, what's going on there. And then you start to see the other people in your family, how they can provide for their kids and the different things they can do. So many of the Bells are teachers, like literal teachers, and coaches, teachers and coaches. Like, I self-proclaimed myself the people's coach. But like, it's like in our blood. My brother, Mad Dog, Mike, me and my brothers, we helped John Cena get into professional wrestling. And one of John Cena's first coaches was my brother Mike.
No way. I didn't know that.
And so like coaching's like in our DNA somewhere.
Turning your body into a carbohydrate processing machine is the key to developing a great physique, right? If you want to really get, if you're an overweight, sedentary individual, we're going to approach your diet differently. But if you're somebody who's trying to get really lean, carry a bunch of muscle mass, and perform well, you need to be a carbohydrate processing machine. So
do you find that everybody's a little different there, or is there like kind of a sweet spot with the amount of carbohydrates you take in per day based on your body weight and things like that?
For sure. I mean, we can't just start anyone and everyone off on a high carb diet. It's relative, but we can train your ability to utilize more carbohydrates over time. And part of that is going to go hand in hand with training, right? Especially if you can add additional muscle mass, we can improve your insulin sensitivity, build your metabolism over time. Like when I was playing football, I was about the same body weight as I am now playing offensive line, but a drastically different body composition. And I'm eating more now and way leaner. But it's because my metabolism has been trained over years and years, kind of eating like a bodybuilder, just training my body to handle more and more food. And, you periodize your diet, kind of similar to how you would training, right? I go through my gain phases, go through my cutting phases where I diet down like a bodybuilder, get really, really lean, reverse diet out, maintain for a bit, and then start going to a surplus.
So I think the term reverse dieting is something that's fairly new and it confuses a lot of people. How would you describe reverse dieting?
Yeah, so when you diet down, and depending on how aggressively you diet, how depleted and lean you get, kind of necessitates a reverse diet more. So someone like me, who I dieted down to near bodybuilding stage ready condition, 5% body fat on DEXA. So over the course of a diet, your metabolism down regulates, right? Your body essentially senses we're in a state of starvation. It doesn't know you're dieting. It just senses, hey, we've been at a deficit for 16 weeks. We need to slow everything down. We got to preserve all of our body's resources because we may need to survive through this famine, right?
Yeah, I recently spoke to somebody that thought that this well-known person that said that was mostly a myth. And I'm like, I've gotten pretty lean, and you can feel like you get colder easier. You don't generate heat.
That's like thyroid downregulation.
Yeah, you don't want to move around as much. You know what I mean? Like everything looks good to you to like eat. Like your metabolism not crashes. I don't know if that's the right word, but you definitely downregulate how many calories you burn on a regular basis.
Yeah, and it's not just doesn't drop off a cliff, but you diet down for 16 weeks and you're in a deficit for that entire time.
It's like your brain starts to use less energy.
Yeah. Like by the end of my last diet, I was a zombie. Yeah. I mean, just finding the energy to form sentences.
And I normally find it's about that 6 to 7% body fat range where people really start to struggle too.
Yeah, I mean, that's out in the wild. You get that lean. I mean, you're on the brink of starvation. Like you better go find a woolly mammoth to kill and eat, right? Yeah. So, but it's our biological mechanism to try to survive and preserve. So over the course of the diet, your metabolism downregulates. So, when the diet ends, if you just try to jump back to the same amount of calories you were eating pre-diet, well, now that's a huge surplus, right? Let's say pre-diet, I was eating, I'm just going to throw out numbers, 5,000 calories, maintaining on 5,000. by the end of the diet, I might be maintaining only on 3,000, 3,500 calories, whatever it is. If I jump right back up to 5,000, I'm now in a 1,500 calorie surplus, right? And that is just going to pile body fat on quickly. So a reverse diet is essentially taking a few weeks to dig yourself out of the deficit and just slowly build your calories back up to maintenance without just jumping there and putting on a bunch of body fat. So,
it's actually great insight, man. A gradual progression back, because that is so common for people when they get done with a diet. They just go right back to eating well.
And it's hard because, and I always tell people, like, go into it mentally prepared that once the diet ends, the reverse diet's basically the fourth quarter of the diet. Like, treat it the same way you would the diet, because it's got to remain structured. And those first few weeks, food's still not that high. It's just a little bit higher than it was when the diet ended. And honestly, you're probably going to be hungrier during the reverse diet. It's sort of like at the end of the cut, you're almost sort of like numb to the hunger in a way. It's like your body's like accepted its fate.
Some good rich food in a little bit.
As soon as you put a little bit more food in there, it's like you wake something up. It's like, what? Food's back on the menu? Let's get the hunger signal.
You know, actually people forget too, though, if you treat it right, it's a great time to gain muscle.
It is.
Because you are so primed to be anabolic, and you're starting from such a low body fat percentage. That if you treat that right, it's a great time. A lot of people, they just take a break, so they back off on their training. They don't pay attention to their diet, so they don't really take advantage of a prime opportunity to grow.
Yeah, so there's also kind of we call it or in the bodybuilding world, call it a rebound phenomenon, where exactly what you just described. Although you're predisposed to fat gain, you're also in an environment where you can be hyper anabolic.
Yeah.
Your insulin sensitivity is going to be the best it's ever going to be. And insulin sensitivity, in layman's terms, it's just your body's ability to put carbohydrates to good use.
Insulin is the most anabolic hormone there is.
Exactly. So if you're really sensitive to insulin, you start eating more carbohydrates, your body's going to be really receptive to that, and it's going to be very anabolic. And you kind of have this dry sponge effect at the end of the diet where, a dry sponge, you fill it with water, it soaks up, and your muscles are primed to fill up with glycogen, fill up with water and electrolytes, and your appetite's going to be up. Your motivation is probably going to be high. We're done cutting. We can start building some tissue here.
I've always found, like, when I used to bodybuild and after I died down, I always wanted to train after the show because I felt good for the first time in forever.
Yeah.
I'd all of a sudden look forward to going to the gym again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And those final weeks of the cut, I'm already planning out the training for, once the reverse diet starts. But you're exactly right. If you can stay structured as you're bringing your food up, if you're training effectively, you might put on more muscle in that 6-week post-diet window than any other time of the year.
There are a handful of formative books that I've read in my life. I can honestly say that your book is one of those.
Oh, thank you.
And you broke breathing down into 3 main areas. And I thought that was very good in how you did that, to kind of understand that the yoga hands are kind of one aspect of breathing, but there are also very important other aspects of breathing. Can you go into some of the important aspects?
Well, when I started looking at breathing, I came upon all the woo-woo stuff, which was great. There's nothing wrong with that. It's very good for people who like woo-woo stuff. So, and then I was in yoga class and things, and I wanted metrics. So I come from a place where psychometrics, IQ testing, court testing, neurological testing. So I kept wanting to know baselines, like what's your PR as far as
that's
breathing.
One of the things I love about your book is you have ways to measure breathing that don't require very expensive, non-accessible equipment, which is amazing. Yeah.
And that was very purposeful because there's lots of expensive equipment, and there's take VO2. Okay. Testing is that I was in a gym, and I won't mention the gym, and part of their introductory stuff is to do VO2 testing, right? So you look super cool, right? Because you've got this thing on your face and you're running hopefully fast. So
I always pretend I'm Darth Vader.
I love Darth Vader. And I remember saying, okay, well, they said, oh, you did really well. And I said, okay, well, can you break that down for me? What does that mean? And how do I get better? Crickets. Because no one knew how to, the people that don't get enough training to explain it. And then making your VO2 better is tough. So I look more at lung capacity, lung velocity, and the mechanics of the breathing. And which is, partly what probably resonates with you, is that breathing is a movement. It is a movement. So when I teach classes, I talk about a squat. That's how I say it's exactly like a squat. So we're going to look at your form with a squat. So are you rounding your back and your knees are caving in? Well, we got to fix that before we load the bar.
And then in addition, breathing is something, well, we do it all day long.
Yeah.
You had a stat in there about the volume of air that the average human breathes every day, which is just astounding amount. And something we do all day long, but we even consciously do it. We can both consciously and unconsciously do it, which is one of the few things. And so like the squat is obviously very important, but it's not something we do all day, every day.
Yeah.
So this is something we can affect. And this is the best part. A lot of the people for life enhancement, there's always a price tag attached to it, whether they want it to be or not. This is one of the few things that anybody, literally the poorest person, can do this and enhance their life.
And it's the most basic. It's the lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So for me, this is the most important thing. Like, there's other things that are really good for you that you can do, but this is the factors from how you breathe and longevity. I mean, there's a direct line with lung capacity and strength of your breathing to longevity. So there's a lot of other things you can do, but focus on that one. It's right there in front of you.
Low-hanging fruit,
yeah,
right?
Low-hanging fruit.
Affects your endurance, your longevity, your strength, your resiliency, your recovery ability.
And even weird things like cerebral spinal fluid flush. So you have your brain is in liquid, and it needs to be flushed out just like you flush a toilet out, right? So that is every time you have that happen.
I've always pictured my brain being like a toilet that needs to be flushed every once in a while. It's funny.
It might be more like a toilet.
Get rid of all the shit.
Yeah, all this bad stuff you're thinking. So when you take a diaphragmatic breath, that's what happens. And the problem that's happening throughout our whole body is that most of us are underutilizing the diaphragm. So we have switched, and our primary breathing muscles are now what used to be auxiliary muscles. And, you're geeky about this enough to understand that, but that is mind-blowing, is that in the history of mankind, we have now taken this and changed it and corrupted it so badly that we now don't use our diaphragm the way we should be, and it really affects you.
The way you paint that picture of like how that has changed is because you said, you're kind of in psychology, and there's a lot of psychology in our culture that's tied to it, like sucking in and puffing your chest out and the doctor with the stethoscope. Can you talk to that? Because you're so much more eloquent and why it is that we breathe this way today.
So, I'd like to go back to primitive man because I like, my brother's an anthropologist and, he always puts things in context for me. But primitive man was a much better breather. Okay. So bigger nostrils, stronger diaphragm, bigger lung capacity. And then, so there's things historically that have happened from that point. And then there's modern life and us changing breathing consciously. So it's two really big things to unpack. So when you look at historically, you have to think that primitive man sat more in a squat and was closer to the ground. So better back breather, just better breather because the diaphragm was only a breathing muscle. So then what was the biggest change, when you look at history of man?
Probably the chair or something, like getting up off the ground, not squatting
Getting up
down.
off the ground, exactly. So now coming off the ground and walking around. And then the world changed. There was more grasslands. You had to go further for food, so you had to run. And that's, why we're supposed to be such great runners, right?
Yeah.
So now the diaphragm is a muscle of balance because you're standing up, right?
That's another thing you touch on, like the diaphragm. If we think about it all, we only think about it for like singing or talking or breathing, but it's a postural muscle as well.
Yes.
And it affects our postural muscles.
Yes. And it's, like I said, it's everything above it and everything below it is affected. So your cerebral spinal fluid flush, your being able to speak, your longevity, because most people don't die of the disease they're diagnosed with. They die of pneumonia.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, I've never thought about that.
Your ability to exhale and cough well is really important for that reason. Your arousal is that if you're not breathing diaphragmatically, you don't have as much control over your arousal. We can go deep into that. But also that your diaphragm is your main muscle of digestion.
Yeah.
So you have, this peristalsis happening. And if your digestion works the best when your diaphragm is actually massaging the top of your digestive organs.
Yeah.
And, if you don't know if that's happening, you should know that. That's a metric. The breathing IQ, which is what I teach, is a metric that you should know, just like your blood pressure.
Wow.
And then there's pelvic floor.
Pelvic floor, yeah.
And then there's the fact that people who breathe, more auxiliary muscle dominant are going to have more knee and ankle injuries. So it's throughout your whole body. It's really wild.
One of the things I think I personally like about the kettlebell, and a lot of fans like, is that it's a challenge in and of itself to get better at using it as a thing. It becomes your sport, your activity, your fun, and you got this nice movement challenge to chase.
It really is, man. It's one of those things that's extremely uncomfortable at first, but the more you use it, the more comfortable it gets, the more natural it feels to pick one up and have one in your hands and to lift with it. And you understand like the ways that you have to lift with it just feel more natural. Like, it's like, this is kind of how our body was kind of meant to move, like to make kind of an awkward weight feel very unawkward in how it moves. You know what I mean?
You mentioned something downstairs talking about how almost every lift with the kettlebell, besides recreating dumbbell lifts, involves a curvilinear path versus the straight up and down.
Yeah.
And I always talk about that as, traditional gym lifting is all vertical loading or enhanced gravity. And that obviously works. Mm-hmm. But if we're thinking about like specificity of field of play or even just day-to-day life, most of the time we have to create force. It's in different directions.
Yeah.
So being able to handle different directional forces is probably useful.
Yeah. Yeah, I always, whenever somebody's struggling with a kettlebell, I say, if it doesn't feel right, you're trying to do one of two things. You're trying to lift it straight up and down, or you're trying to hold it like you do a barbell or a dumbbell, perfectly pronated or perfectly supinated.
Totally.
If you just stop trying to do those two things and just like lift it in the way it feels right, first of all, if you know nothing about kettlebells, just lift it the way that feels right. Forget everything you know about exercise.
Yeah.
And like, if you were just a Joe on the street and you had to lift this over your head, how would you do it? And that's probably going to be closer than how you've been taught to do a seated dumbbell overhead press.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's when people love talking about constraint-based coaching, it kind of is a constraint-based tool where if you do it wrong, it sucks. And so you kind of have to figure out how to do it right. Now, there's enough baby giraffes out there. I almost said motor morons, but
I've never heard the term. I like that.
I just call them baby giraffes. It's cuter and less offensive to some people. But it is a self-teaching tool to an extent because some people obviously keep screwing it up.
Yeah.
And wrapping up that story, like boom, 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 using the kettlebells for power or for athleticism, this is where those traditional meatheads have a hard time with it, is they go, well, it's not as heavy and you can't pick up as much because it gets big. I'm like, well, that's actually a feature because now it's this odd strength, which is hard to quantify in some ways, which I understand that makes people reticent.
They can't quantify it.
And especially on those curvilinears.
Even though I question how much they actually measure, but they still want things they could quantify if they wanted to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And so the shape of the bell, the handle, the way that you can turn your hand like you were talking about, make it comfortable, you can't accelerate a barbell in the same way because it smashes your knee.
Yeah.
You can't accelerate a dumbbell because of the shape and the size of how it is. So, without going too grandiose, because there is the kettlebell people that overblow it, and that makes us all lose credibility, is it allows you to do certain things differently than other tools. And if you take advantage of those unique properties, you can get some really cool results. Namely, you can accelerate the load down, and nobody argues that a kettlebell swing is useful, right? Like quick, fast eccentric into the sagittal plane for the posterior chain, hamstring, glute explosion. Great. We can do that in different directions. And because of the shape of the tool, and that really allows us to explore like loading our explosive speed skaters or rotate into it, kind of like how we might have to rotate on any athletic endeavor.
The more exposure I've gotten, the more coaches I've worked around, the more who I've seen people who have opposing philosophies to me get equal or better results. At a certain point, you have to sit back and say, okay, like, how arrogant is it for me to assume that my way is the best way or it's the only way?
Well, also, like, every time somebody puts out this broad sweeping statement, the first thing that comes to mind are all the contextualities
100%
that goes into all of the exceptions to that being the rule. When they say the pump doesn't matter or only do a full range of motion or this and that, it's like, yeah, good, for general, like you said, if you're not a state trooper, but then there maybe are times when it does matter or a full range of motion isn't ideal, things like that. It's like, it's hard to say those concrete statements.
For sure.
And also just for anything that's optimal for any athlete, there's so many contextualities that go into what's optimal for that athlete. As a trainer, it's our job to understand all the contextualities. Even on a day-to-day basis, what might be best for that athlete might change.
100%. And I think where a lot of that comes from, in my opinion, and it is opinion, so you know what they say about those, but people want certainty. And I think that's why we've seen this huge surge in the optimal or evidence or science-based training community, which, by the way, a lot of good things about that.
Oh, sure.
A lot of not great as well.
Well, the thing about science-based, though, is they'll say it. There's no certainty in science-based.
Yes. Well, the good ones will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A study doesn't prove anything.
No. It's theory. Most of the time it is theory,
it's
right?
Good theory, dude.
But yeah, like most of the DMs I get, the questions I get is, what's the best split? Yeah. What's the best exercise for that? But what the real question is people want to know that what they're doing is the air quotes best, because it gives them certainty that if they do the thing, they're going to get the outcome they want.
Yeah. And the best outcome for the least amount of work.
100%.
They don't want to waste effort and time. You know what I mean? Right. It's funny.
But the irony is like the amount of time and effort people put into trying to find the thing that they're going to have to exude the least amount of time and effort is so counterproductive to just, if they went in and did something that was suboptimal, but put a lot of effort into it
all the time. I see suboptimal shit working all the
time.
And I see these people that are optimal and they kind of look like shit.
Noodles.
And it's like, you're kind of goofy because, well, maybe you're just not a good athlete. And that's okay.
Sure.
But then also, like, you're very optimal and like not very intense or consistent. So it's like, what's more important, being optimally every once in a while or just consistently getting in there and grinding, and this is from, like, we live in the fucking science. Like, I'm not a scientist, but I read a lot of it.
Yep.
And I'm just coming from somebody that reads a lot of science. And like, if I could speak on what's optimal, I'm as much qualified to do that as a lot of other people.
Yes.
And it doesn't really fucking matter.
No.
Not nearly as much as fucking effort and consistency.
Yes.
And safety,
Yes. And I just had this conversation yesterday. I was on another podcast and the host quoted something I said, and it was something to the tune of like, programming matters a whole lot less than effort and intensity.
Yeah.
And it goes back to, the beginning of this particular conversation where it was like, you want to believe that your programming matters a lot. And like, it does. Like, the decisions you make do matter, but they pale in comparison to someone who's willing to show up and work their ass off and show up every day when they're supposed to and put that level of effort into it. And I think that's kind of the underpinning thing. Like, as I look at, different training philosophies, programming styles, the things that underpin all of that make them successful, regardless of context, is the people who are doing them correctly, working really hard, and doing them consistently will get results.
Yeah.
And that was my quote. I said, training works.
Yeah.
But there's a big difference between training and working out.
Yeah, that's true too.
Working out's great.
Yep.
If your goal is to just be as healthy.
Well, then also we have these training snobs that they see people are just working out and they hate on them. Like, maybe that person just wants to work out.
That's just what they want to slap some 45s on either side and rep that motherfucker out. Let them do it.
I do that sometimes. I'm like, I don't log on my shit.
Some of y'all just like feet. That's okay. Shit.
You don't log every foot that you
that you clock.
You don't have a little foot journal.
Listen, you go to the gym.
You don't measure every toenail.
Yeah. Some girls on the turf warming up, you see the nice pair of feet, you say, that's sweet, and you just keep rolling.
Just move on. You don't have to write it in your little fucking foot journal. You can if you want, though.
Can if you want. Depends on how important it is.
I'm not going to kink shame you for your foot journal. I mean, and then like, I don't log a lot of my weights and stuff like that. And then I see people that never do and they still get stronger. Because every day they're pushing, they're very intuitive after a while. But like you said, at the beginning, you're not a fucking state trooper, so don't speed. Nope. At the beginning, it's probably really good to log your weights.
Yes.
And follow a progressive outline
And, you know, because I was kind of forced into that at a young age because I was in sports and stuff. And, you know, we had to have our fucking journal. And hey, guess what? It really works. It really, really works.
It does
really
work.
well.
It does.
Yeah. So you train a lot of elite athletes.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of my goal is to bridge the gap between what elite athletes get and bring it to more of a general population.
I'm with you on that, brother.
So what do you see as the gulf that lies in between that it's going to take to get some of, you know, the things that you use with your elite athletes to the everyday person?
It's perspective.
Okay.
I think, and what I mean to say is like the training and coaching community have drawn this line in the sand.
Yeah.
And even the terminology we use is athlete gen pop, right? Now it's fair to some degree, right? Because the outcomes ultimately are different. But when push comes to shove, most of the time, the exact same training principles I'm using when Jamar Chase walks in are the same thing when my housewife walks in. Now, it's contextual.
Do you just call Kelly Matthews your housewife?
No, definitely not. Absolutely not. She would beat my ass if I did that. But my Gen Pop clients and my elite athletes, you know, their goals are different. What they're capable of expressing physically in terms of speed and output are different, but the way I train them is not very different. And in fact, I've got a concept I'm working on and an idea that I believe in, that training to be an athlete is training. Training to be more athletic or maintain athletic qualities is longevity training. That's what it is.